So, did you complete the assignment?
Hi, Shubham. Yes, yes. And for the last problem, I am stuck with something. I couldn't find a best possible way. So I have done, but it's uh, I'm still figuring out some bugs in the code.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And how is the course going? Is it very heavy or everything is
No, no, no. It's completely fine because I'm finding it very challenging, and I can see some improvements in myself. Previously, when I start the course, then I used to refer the commands side by side, and then use the commands in the code. But now it is coming on my memory because as you are giving so many exercises, I used to do some work on that. So now it is getting into my memory, and now it is becoming easier for me. It's not heavy. I don't say it's heavy. It's good.
all right? So actually, in this course, I had not planned to include algorithmic efficiency, but I
Okay.
guess today's class I'll complete object-oriented programming.
Okay.
Because I don't know a lot about object-oriented programming. I know a little bit, and that's what I'll cover. And
Okay.
yeah, so I was thinking to cover a little bit of algorithmic efficiency, and then we'll move on to the libraries, NumPy libraries, pandas, and
Okay.
matplotlib maybe. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Pratibha. So I have not seen your assignment yet. I asked you to send a PDF. Could you send me the
Sir,
PDF?
I'll just send it. Sir, I'll send it now, sir.
Oh,
Remote
sure.
exam.
So not now. You can send it today after the class.
Yes.
All right. So we'll start. I'll ask you to mute. Yeah. Thank you. So I hope my screen is visible. So today I have planned to cover a little bit more about object-oriented programming and some concepts related to it. And before that, in my previous lecture, I guess, so am I audible? Na? I'm audible, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So in my previous lecture, I guess I had told you that um, Python doesn't have a switch statement. I don't know if I have mentioned this or not, but this is a new addition to Python. So there is something very similar, not very similar. It is actually a manifestation of switch statement. If you are familiar with switch, it is there in other languages like Java and C++. Very similar to that, which is called match. And this has been introduced to Python in 3.10. All right, so we will talk about match a little bit and then we'll move forward. So if you're not familiar with switch statement, what it does is it takes an input and it takes the input and matches with the cases in the inputs. And if a case match or the value of the case and the input you are trying to match is same, then whatever is inside the case, it runs. So it will be better understood by an example. So let us say x is equals to not let us make a function. So we'll make a function of weekdays. So we know what are the weekdays and we'll ask the user which weekday they want. All right. So before writing the function, let us see what the user wants. So suppose the user wants to see what is weekday 3. So weekday 3, suppose the weekday starts from Sunday. So the weekday 3 should be Wednesday. All right. So if it starts with 0 and if it starts with 1, then the weekday 3 will be um, Tuesday. All right. So we'll see how we'll implement this code. So we'll say this is a keyword match, and you have to give the input, the value. So this is the input which is given to the function, and you have to say n. All right. And then just a minute. Why didn't this? Okay, I'll see. So we'll say case 0, case. So if the weekday you start with 1, so you'll say 1, and whatever is inside this one, it will be executed. So since this is a function, I'm returning something. So return, say Sunday. All right. Again, similarly, you can say case 2 and say return Monday. So let me see this code is working or not. So weekdays. All right. Yes, it is working. So what it is doing is it is taking the input n, and this match statement is trying to match with the cases. All right. Now I have only given 2. Let me give all the cases, and then there will also be a default case. But before that, if you have come from other languages, you may recall that each case has a break statement. And here in Python, you do not require to give a break statement. Automatically, that case will be executed. So after that, those the cases which are below that case will not be executed. But here you see there is a return statement. So you may argue that the cases below that will not be executed. So for another example, so I have not completed this, but before that, so say x is 4 and you want to match x, say case 0, print something. So I'll say print x is 0, and then say case 2. Yes, do you want to speak? X is 2 and say okay case 2 and say case 4, print x is 4, and there is also default statement in this match. So how do we capture default statement, and what is a default statement? Suppose none of the cases match with the value of the variable you're trying to match with. And in that case, that statement will get matched. So it is very similar to if else statement. All right. And in that case, we have to give one underscore. So case space underscore, whatever is the which all the other cases which are not there, which we have listed, will be taken care of by this case. And you can say print um, x is none of the above, or x is greater than 4. Now you see, we have not given break statement in any of the cases. In other languages, you should have a break statement, and you will see that when this case is run, then this case will not be run. All right. And when you execute this, you see none of the other cases below that case has run. So break is not required over here in Python. So let us complete this. So we have seen what it will do, but since for completeness sake, I'll just complete it. So x3 will be returned Tuesday. And similarly, it will be case 4, it will be returned Wednesday. Case 5 will be returned Thursday. Case 6 will be Friday. Yeah. And then case 7 will be returned Saturday. And we have to give a base case, or else you will run into an error. It will be returned invalid day number. All right. So if you see, if I print some more cases, say 10 and -1, and one more is say 5, then you can see the first has returned Sunday, the other two has returned invalid day number, and the last one has returned Thursday. All right. Now, in this match statement, you can also have if conditions. So we were here when we were saying x is equals to 4. Here you can have if statement. Suppose I will give more cases. So say case 6 is equals 6. So let me just write it. Print x is um, greater than 4. This is also fine. Now you see, um, mm, should I write this? No, let me write x is 6, and one more case I'll do. Say case um, underscore and print x is odd number. So you see, I have broken down the base case. So there should be a space between case and underscore. You see, I have broken down the base case into two cases. But before doing that, you have to have a if statement to distinguish between what cases you want to refer. So you can say case underscore if x modulo 2 equal to 0. So is not equals to 0. Yeah, is not equals to, but is not, yeah, not equals to 0. So you see the base case I have broken down into two parts. Similarly, you can have other cases as well. So if you want to say um, case 6 and if else, if x something, then you can also do that. Suppose you want to say case 7 and so there is one more variable y equals to 2, and if y equal to 2, then print, so let it be 8 print x is 8 and y is 2. So you can do that also. All right. So if you run this and suppose x is 4 I have given, suppose x is 5, and you see if x is 5, this case will be valid because none of the previous cases are matching and x is an odd number. So this will get executed. You see, sorry, what did it happen? Expected. Achha, okay. It shouldn't be and here and shouldn't be here. All right. Now you see it is saying it is printing this x is odd number. All right. So this is how you do. Now suppose x is 8 and y is equals to 2, then this case will run. If x is 8 and y is 2, then this case should run. And you see this case has run. X is 8 and y is 2. Similarly, you can have Boolean expression. So this is a Boolean expression you can do, and z is equals to 3. And you can have one more here, z equals to 3, and when you run this, then you will have this. So you can modify this also, and z is 3, and so on. So this is how you can have match with if. All right. And one more thing which I have told you, that you can break the base cases. All right, this is also important. Suppose you have to check if a number is odd, even, and 0. So you can do that over here. So these all can be done. All right. So any questions over here in match statement? So it is actually called match case statement. I'll just edit it. Match case statement. STATEMENT. All right. So this is a new addition in Python. If it is not running in your computer, then you are not running the latest version of Python. You can update your Python version and then you can use it. It has been included in Python 3.1.0 and later versions. Yes.
Sir, if there is a chance of getting both the cases satisfied,
Sorry.
suppose if I give the number as 6,
Okay.
x value is 6.
X value is 6, and you are saying that there are two cases. This
Yeah.
also and this also. So the first one will run. You see, the first one should run actually. The first one will run. This will run. Whenever the first is run, it comes out of that match. So if you print something over here and you can check print out of match case statement. Now if you run, you see this is run and then the control comes over here. Any questions? So I'm moving forward. All right. So you see, I have thought that I'll discuss object-oriented programming a little bit more, and then we'll see and move on to class methods and inheritance. That is what I have planned for today. So suppose I have a class, not class. So this is not class of Python. Suppose we have a class in real life in a school, and there are students in that school. So we have students. So I'll just comment it. Students, and each student has a section. So section. So suppose that students are of class 7, all the students are of class 7, and they have section A, section B, section C, and section D. Suppose there are 4 sections. All right. So I want to ask the user what is the name of the student and in which section the student is, and then print it. So we can do that in different ways. So we can do that in different ways. So you see, now we'll discuss different approach to programming. So first I'll show you sequential approach to programming. Then we'll go to methodological approach of programming, where we call methods, and then we will move on to object-oriented programming. So first the sequential approach. So first we'll ask a name from the user. So it will be name input, and just name. We'll ask the name, and then we'll ask section. So it will be input, and we'll say section. All right. And then we'll print it. So I'm writing it in this box only. So I'll say F, I'll use F string. I'll say name is in section, section. All right. So it is saying that we are taking an input for the name, then an input for the section, and this print statement is actually whatever is the name of the student is in section A, B, C, D, whatever the user inputs. Suppose I'm executing this and I'm saying Arjun, name is Arjun, and section is D. Sorry. Okay, section is D. Then it will say Arjun is in section D. All right, simple. Now we can do this using functions as well. So you see, we may not only have one student, we may have many students in the class. So in that case, not Python class, in a class in a school, right? So in that case, we can have many students, and for that we have seen that making a function and calling a function again and again to take the user input is a better approach to do. All right, so we'll say diff, and we can give anything. So I'm saying print student, or just I'll say main, def main. All right. We have not seen these functions in Python till now, but main is a function. If you have a program, so we are actually running in a Anaconda prompt. So over here we don't make a file, but in case you are making a file and then you are sharing that file to anyone and someone else is running that code, so this main function will be the main where every command is there and it calls other functions. And whenever you run that code, main function will be run first. All right. So you see, I am saying def main, and also there is something called, I'll show you. I'll show you. So you see, I'm taking a name, so I'll just copy paste it, and I'm saying this main function will take an input from the user, which is name, and then again an input, which is section, and then it will print it. All right. And there is one more function which is actually get student. So it gets the student from the user. So I will not write this function now because my main function is actually taking the input from the user. But in case I want to make a get student function and get the name and section from that function, I can do that. So I'm just writing for the time being get student over here, and then I'll show how we'll update this code. So I'll say pass. All right. And this we have not done till now, but it is if underscore underscore name underscore underscore equal to, it will be underscore underscore main underscore underscore. So what does this mean? I'll tell you. So what does this mean? This line means. So just for the time being, ignore this. All right. So what does this mean? You see, you can write a program in a Python file and you can share it. You can also import that file. So when we write import some module, so we can say import dash 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 anything we are importing from elsewhere, and then we are running it. We can do that, or we can just run that file. So suppose this file, so this is not a file because this complete Python notebook is a file. But since suppose you have a file called something xyz.py, and you're running that file. When you run that file, if you're running that file, then this if will check if that file has been called by some other code, or if it is running by its name. Suppose if it is running by its name, then whatever is inside this if block will be executed. So I'll tell this again. Suppose this code block is a Python file called test.py. Suppose so this is not here because I'm not running it in VS Code to show you. But suppose this short code block is a Python file called test.py. So if you are executing this code and you're executing this code test.py, then this if block will check this test is actually run. This is very cryptic, but it means if you are running that code test.py, then whatever is inside this block will run. And if you are importing this test.py to some other file and then you are calling some function inside this test.py, then whatever is inside this if block will not run. So why this is important? Suppose you have a very big code and that is for running some program, and you want to run that some of the functions in that program only when that program is run. So suppose you are opening a Word document in your computer, and you can also plug in. So if you know about plugin, you can also plug in Word files in net. So in that case, when you open Word file in your program or in a game, suppose in a game you are starting the game afresh. So when you are starting the game afresh, some initializations are required, like everything should be refreshed and so all that. So in that case, this commands, whatever should be run when a file is run afresh, is given inside this if name is equals to main. So this is cryptic. You should remember what this is. Then only all the execution which is there inside the if statement will run. Otherwise, you can load some part of the code in some running program or running game. In that case, whatever is inside the if block will not run, and that specific function if you want to use will be used. So suppose I'm importing random and I am saying random dot random, and I'll say like this. So when you run this, you see I am running one function of a module called random. In that case, the random.py file is not getting executed as a whole. Only one function of that file is being executed. And whatever is inside the if block of that random.py file will not be executed. It will only be executed if you are running random.py in the command prompt. So if you are running that random.py in your command prompt, then only whatever is inside the if block will be run. So if underscore underscore name equal to underscore underscore main, this thing. All right. So I suppose it was clear. Any doubt? All right. So in this case, if you don't want to do that because this is a very short file, you can just say main. You can just say main and you can run main. All right. And if you run this, you see name will be asked. So I can say Arjun, Arjun, and you can say section D. So I'm saying D, so I'll say D. So Arjun is in section D. So this main functions runs fine. All right. And you can also run this way if name this one, if you uncomment this, if you run this, then it will be run. So no problem because you are just running that code. Arjun, and he is in section D and Arjun is in section D. So either way, it is working fine. But when you have large files and you are calling that file from other files, then in that case, this is important. All right. So for the time being, I may use either of those. So let me use just main. All right. Now what I want to do, I want to shift this input, taking input from the user to another function called get student, and we have done this many times. All right, this is just you are making some function which takes user input. So this function will take a user input. All right, so it takes two user input and it returns. What it will return? Let me return a tuple. So what tuple it is? It will be name, comma, section. All right, and over here we don't require all this. We'll just have a function call, and the function call will be get student. This function call will be there. And since this function is returning a tuple, I can take a tuple over here. I'll say name, comma, section. All right. So you see, this name, comma, section is a different variable than this name, comma, section. It is just as a coincidence, I have given the same name. You can have different names. You can say N and S. It will work. And we have learned this. All right. If you do this also, it will work. These are just passing of parameters. And if you run, you will see Arjun, Arjun, and section D. So Arjun is in section D. But for reading purpose, so making it clear, I'll just rename all the variables. All right. So it's very simple. We have a we have done this same thing, but over here we have implemented a function. All right. So these two functions, one function is actually taking user input and the other function is just printing. Simple. Now you see, in earlier classes, we have seen that we can return a tuple, but we can also return a any other data type, not just tuple. All right, so you can either return, so we are returning here a tuple, we can also return a list. So in that case, I just copy paste this command, this code, and I'll say I'm returning a list. So you can change it like this way, and I guess this will not work. Let me see if it is working. I guess Arjun and B. Okay, it is working. So this is working. So it is just an unpacking. So whatever is the out return of this function get student, it is just unpacked to name and section. You can also do like this. So what I'm saying is you can do name equals to get student. So first you can say student and then student equal to get student. So student will be a list and then name will be name equals to student 0 and what is this section? Section is student 1. So this is very similar to the previous command, but over here I'm storing the return statement in a variable called student, and it will do the same thing. Arjun and section D. All right. Sorry. Yes. Now you see we have done this using tuple. We have done this using list. We can also do that using dictionaries. All right. So how will we do that using dictionary? You see, we are taking user input as name and student. So these are actually variables which are values. And dictionary is what? Dictionary is actually key value pairs. So one will be key and one will be value. So you can do that. So in a dictionary, it starts with a curly braces. So this will be key and there will be value. So key value pair. So in that case, you will have to say this is key and key is a string. So you'll say name colon, and this name is actually the value which is taken from the user input, this name. Similarly, this section will be the key and the value of this section will be section. All right. And over here, what we will do, we will say student we are getting over here. And I'll just remove this. It is not required. Okay, it is required. So I'll say student and over here bracket, I'll say name. So this is actually a dictionary. Yes. Any doubt? All right. So student is actually a dictionary because get student returns a dictionary and name will be student and the key. So key is name and student. I'll here it will be section because section is the key. And when you run this, this will work. You see, we have used name and section a lot of times, but you should distinguish which is a variable, which is a key, which variable is in which function and so on. So if you come back and see, you see, this is actually a variable. This name and this section is a variable of function get student. This name and this section are keys of the dictionary which we are returning. Over here, when we come back, this name is actually the key of the returned dictionary. This section is the key of the returned dictionary, and this name and this section are variables to the function main. And then we are printing name is in section. All right. So if you run this command, or not command, code, you will get Arjun, and he is in section D. All right. So Arjun is in section D. So we have implemented the same thing using various ways. So first we have just written as a code, and this is called sequential programming, where you just write code in a sequence. Over here, the execution of the code is actually whenever the code runs, it just shifts from one place to another whenever there is a function call. All right. Now we'll see another type of programming, which is object-oriented programming. In our previous classes, we have seen this. But why I am again bringing this up, because there are few concepts which I couldn't do in my previous class. All right. So we'll see what it is. So suppose we have a class, and if you don't know what class is, then I guess you have not uh, seen my previous lecture. All right. So it will be difficult for you to uh, follow in this today's lecture. All right. So suppose, so what are we doing? We are taking an input from the user, which is a student, and it has two attributes, name and section. So we will make one object student which has two attributes. One will be name and one will be section. And each time I require one student, I'll make an instance of that object type. All right. So I'm just referring to the terms which we have discussed yesterday. And in case you're not getting it, please go back and see yesterday's lecture. All right. So I'll say class student. And one more thing, it is conventional to name the class name with capital letters. All right. It is just conventional. So I'll say student, class student, and I can say pass. And one more thing, I guess I have not told you this. Instead of pass, you can write three dots. This is just also means pass. Python has this convention that if you write three dots, it is similar to pass. All right. So we have one class or object type called student, and we have not written any attributes in that class. We are saying that there is just an object type which is student. All right. And now I'll write some functions. So first function I'll write main, which is only used to print. So over here also, this main function is used to print, and there is a get student function, which is getting the values of the variables. In this case, those are variables from the user. All right. So I'll write those two functions over here. So it will be main function, and I'll say student is equals to get student, student, student is equals to. So I'm calling this get student function. All right. So I'm calling this get student function, and I'll just print this print statement. I'll copy. All right. I'll just copy the print statement. So I have a function which is actually calling a student. It is calling get student and storing it in students, and we have not got this name and sections. So for the time being, I'm just keeping it blank. All right. We have to fill this, otherwise there will be an error, but we'll come back to it. Now we'll define one more function called get student. And in this function, you see, we have an object called student. So we'll create an instance of this object type, and I'll just name this small student. All right. And I'll say capital S student and give parenthesis. You see, this student is actually, so this term I had not used yesterday, but I'm using it now. It is actually a constructor. And what is meant by a constructor? Constructor creates an object in the memory. And what is the object type? The object type is student, which capital S. All right. So this object type, there is this constructor call is actually instantiating, or sorry, it actually creates an instance of the object type student. It creates an object in the memory, and that is why it is known as constructor. It is a constructor call. It is creating an object in the memory which is of type student, and I'm naming that object as student with small s. All right. So this is an object student. This is an object type capital S student, and this is a constructor call. Now You see, in this definition of the student class, I have not given attributes. And if you have come from other languages like Java and C++, you may know that you cannot change the attributes from outside the class. But in Python, you can change the attributes of an object from outside the class. So you can say student dot name. So yesterday we have seen this dot convention, and I can say input name. All right. Similarly, student dot section is equals to input section. All right. Now we will return this return student. All right. Now you see this student is actually an object of type capital student. All right. And if you are getting confused, I can say S, not an issue. S is an object of type student. If you're getting confused, let me change it to S. So S is an object which is of type student. Now, when this function is getting called, it is returning an student object. All right. So I'll say S over here. So this S and this S is different because those two are different. Those two are in different functions. All right. Now you see we have this S, which is actually a object. You can get the attributes of that object by dot notation. So you can say S dot name and you can say S dot section. Now, if you call main, everything will work. But you see, you have not defined any attributes when you are defining the class. You have defined the attributes outside the class, and this is not recommended. It is not recommended, and I guess you cannot do this in other languages, but Python allows you to do so. And we'll see how you can restrict the user to restrict the user to change the attributes of an object. But for the time being, we are accessing the attributes from outside the student class, and we are changing it in a way, but there is no attribute called name and student, but still we can define those attributes outside the class name and section. All right. So let us do this function call. So you see it is asking for the name. So this line is actually currently running. All right. So we'll say Arjun and section it is asking. So we'll say D and you will get Arjun is in section D. So no issue till now. All right. Any questions? Any questions? All right, so we have seen that this is not a good practice. So let us initiate or initialize this name and section. So we will define one init function. So in yesterday's class, I had shown you double underscore in it double underscore, and you have to pass the first argument as self and whatever the attribute. So first attribute is name and the second attribute is section. All right, and over here I'll say self dot name is equals to name and self dot section is equals to section. All right, and we should actually remove this. It will be name and it will be section, and you have to pass this to the constructor call. Sorry, what did I do? S is equals to student name comma section. So are you getting it? What did we do? We defined the attributes of the object. What are the attributes? The attributes are, so for not getting confused, let me say N and S. Otherwise it is difficult. So SEC. Okay. All right. So what are we doing? So first we are taking input from the user, the name and the section, and then we are creating a object called student, and the object is called S, but the object type is student, and we are passing the values of name and section. So this name value is passed to N and the section value is passed to section, and we are getting the attributes name, whatever the user has input, and whatever the section the user has input, and then it is returning. And when it is returning, this S is getting that object, and then we are printing it. So this is the flow of control. First we are calling main. Main is evoked, and there is a call to this function get student. Get student is run. So we take an input from the user, the name and the section. Then an constructor call is there. Therefore, one object is created in memory. And what are the attributes? The attributes are name and section. These attributes are then stored in the object called S, and this object S is then returned to this S. And then we are printing this S dot name and S dot section. If you are not getting it, tell me, I'll show you in Python tutor, but this is the flow of control. All right. So I'll say Arjun and D. So you'll see Arjun is in section D, but that was the flow of control. Right. Any questions? All right. So we have done this. Now you see this is redundant. We are just creating an instance S and storing it. We are just creating an instance of an object called student S, and then we are again returning it. So this is just redundant. What we can do is we can just take it out and just return that object. We don't need to store it. All right. So that was a redundant piece of line or code. Now if you run that, it will work. Arjun D. All right. Arjun is in section D. Now you may say that what is the benefit? We can do this with um, um, we can do this with dictionaries. We could do this by using lists. We can do this by using uh, tuples and all. In yesterday's class, we have seen what are the benefits, but again, we'll reiterate those benefits. You see, when you are taking the input from the user and storing it as an attribute of that object, you can play with that attributes, that values, and we can check, you can initialize, you can do many things which you could not do when you are using some other data types like lists, tuples, and dictionaries. So suppose you want to validate the input of the user. If the user is giving an appropriate name, if the user is giving an appropriate section, you can do that over here. All right. When you are initializing. So this init is actually initialization. Full form is initialization. So I'll just copy paste this line and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm taking a user input name and I'm checking if the name is not empty. So I'll say if name is not equal to empty. If this is the case, or if name is empty, then raise an error. So in yesterday's class, we have seen that you can raise an error. Raise, R-A-I-S-E, raise. What error should I raise? Let us raise value error, because that value is not appropriate. Empty name is nothing. So we can raise value error, and you can also pass some input as a string such that the user gets some feedback. So we can say empty name not allowed. All right. Similarly, in section, we can check if the section. So in a class, there can be 4 sections, A, B, C, and D. So if the user input something else, there should be an error. So we can check that. So we can say, OK, if n. So you should tell me if I am doing something error. You see, if I should have written n and not name. All right. So if sec not in this list, what is the list? A, B, C, D. So are you guys following, or am I just is it all right? Are you guys following?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Pratibha, Ashok, is it okay? Is it okay? Okay, I hope so. So again, I'm checking if this section is in this list or not. So this is also a way to check. We have done this previously. We'll raise an error. So I'll say raise again value error, value error, and we'll say invalid section because this section is not there. All right. Now you see we have validated the inputs of the user, and with this we could not do. We could have done over here, but you will see we can do more. All right, we can do more. So let me say I'm giving an empty input. So I'm not writing anything in name and just I'm pressing enter. It is asking for section. So let me say D and see there's a value error. It is saying empty name not allowed. So we have validated the user's input inside the object. And how is it different from using a dictionary? You see, you have created an object and you want the object to behave in such way. You want the object to have some properties of a type, and you are checking. So this object called student shouldn't have an empty name. It shouldn't have a section which is not defined. So you are checking it inside the definition of the object. So whenever you create one object in memory, or in, whenever you create an instance of this object in memory, then this value checking will be done. All right. But if you are using a dictionary, you had to do this again and again and again. But over here, whenever you are creating a object in the memory, this value checking will be done. All right. So this is one advantage of uh, doing that in the object definition itself. All right. So I'll just say Arjun, and this time I'll say section E, which is not there. It will again raise a value error and it will say invalid section. Right. And if you give appropriate values, so I'll say Arjun, ARJUN, and I'll say section A. When I press enter, so it is saying Arjun is in section A. So no error. All right. Now you see over here we are saying this. So what do I want to tell now? I can say this F string is there, but in previous class we have seen that you can tell the object definition. In the object definition itself, you can tell how should that object be printed. So you can do that. You can do that using underscore underscore str underscore underscore. All right. So we'll do that. We'll just copy paste it, and we'll say I'll just take it out and I'll make one function here called underscore underscore str underscore underscore, and I'll say self, and then I'll say return and this thing. And when I say print, I'll say print s, and this will work. And if you don't understand what I'm doing, we have done this in our previous class. All right. So this method will be called whenever it is the object is in print command or you're doing strs. All right. And what are we returning? We are returning this format string. All right, so if you do ARJUN and section D, then okay, S is not defined. Over here, I should say self. Over here also, I should say self. All right, so the error which I made is because this instance is called self, you should write self.name. And now you will not get an error. Arjun and D. Arjun is in section D. All right. Now what do I want? So we have seen that you can have other functions also inside the object definition. So you can have some more values like we have student name section. You can also have subjects the student take, and you can check what subject it is. You can manipulate those subjects. I'm not getting into that because we have seen that in our previous class. So what I mean is you can have another function inside this object, and you can define that function. It shouldn't be a special function. So this is a special function. You can define any function and then check the values of the objects, and then you can do a lot more things. All right, so I'm not going into that now. Now we will see a little bit about um, uh, this thing. When we are saying that you can access the values of attributes over here, you can access the values of attributes of a object outside the object definition. This thing creates a issue or problem, which we'll see now, right? So what I will do is I'll just copy paste this entire piece of code, and then I'll paste it over here. And what I will do is, you see, it is the same code as the previous one, all right? Same code. Now we are checking if the name is empty or not. We are also checking if the section is appropriate or not. But Since we have seen that you can access these attributes name and section from outside the definition of the object type, then it is an error. It is an issue. Why it is an issue? You see, you have created the object over here, not over here. You have called this function called get student, and that this get student is taking the user input and created the object over here. Now this object is being stored in S. And now if you change the value of name or section, then this checking will not be done. Why? Because this checking is only done at the initialization time, or at the whenever you are the object is created in memory. That means whenever this code is run. So it is checking if n is appropriate or not, or if it is this section is appropriate or not. But if you change that at a later time point, then this creates an issue. What do I mean by that? You see, I can say s dot. So s is an object of type student, and it has an attribute called section. So this is the attribute name. Sorry. So this is the attribute name called section. So you are saying s dot name, and I'm saying just change it to, you say, whatever it is. So let me say xyz. Now you see xyz is not a valid section because a b c are only the valid section, but we are changing it. And let us see if this creates an error or not. All right, because we have raised a value error. All right, so let me run this, and I'll say Arjun, Arjun, and I'll give an appropriate section. Suppose I'm giving section A. So I am giving section A. Let us see what we are getting. So we are getting Arjun is in section XYZ. Why? Because we have created an appropriate object, which is S, but we are actually changing it over here. And this is not allowed in other languages. It is not allowed in other object-oriented programming like Java and C++, but you can do that over here. But you can make your code robust. You can add some more features to this program, or you can add more properties to your objects such that this doesn't happen. So Python gives you flexibility. It can give you whatever you want. If you want to change it outside the object definition, you can do that, but it is not recommended. But still Python gives you that flexibility. All right, so how can we do that? How can we um, make sure that this is not changed? So how can we make sure that name is appropriate and section is appropriate? For our example, we want to do that. We want to do that if whenever you are changing. So suppose I am allowing you to change it outside the object definition, but whenever you are doing that, this should be taken care of. So how can we do that? We'll see in our next piece of code. Before that, we'll take a break of 5 minutes and we'll meet at 7 at sharp at 7. All right. And if you have error, just stumble upon whatever we have done and you can ask afterwards. All right. So I'll come back at 7.
Okay.
Hello. So I hope everyone is here. Okay, let us move forward. Yes. So I was saying, yeah. So yeah, just to recap, you see, object oriented programming is just an approach of programming. All right. So it is just solving some other issues which you may have in other forms of programming. All right. So this is just an approach to programming. So what are we saying? So we are saying you can access the attribute of instances of objects outside the object definition, and which shouldn't be the case. So before we go on to see how we tackle this thing, let us define some methods, right? So I'll just copy paste everything over here and I'll just comment this section out. I don't want this to be there. So I'll define some um, functions. You see, you can actually get, so if I do like this, so say print s dot name. So if you do this, what are you doing? You are saying that s, the attribute of s, which is name, get that value and print it. So let me show you what it does. All right. So a minute, what happened? All right. So my error. So I'm saying it is Arjun and I'm saying section D. So you see, this s dot name actually helps me get the attribute of s and the value of that attribute name. All right. Now I told you that this is not a good practice because you see, the whole purpose of doing these things was to separate the data structure out from what the user or the programmer is doing. He shouldn't bother what is the attribute is called, or whatever is the value of that, not a value, what is the exact name of that attribute and so on. So you don't want the user to use these names. So so how will he print? So suppose he want to print Arjun. So like we have printed Arjun and the user wants to print Arjun. Then how do you do that? So you see, you have to define some functions, and these functions are called getters and setters. And this is a very standard name in programming. In other programming languages, in other object-oriented programming languages, this name is common. So this is called getter function, and it is very simple function. You just give a name, say get name function, and what are you doing? You're just returning self. Okay, this parameter should be self. All right. So it will be self dot name. So what it is doing, you see, you don't want the user to use this attributes dot name. So you are just giving them a function which will help them get the value of that attribute. So now I'll say s dot get name, get name. In this case, the user just should know that this there is a function called get name, and it doesn't have to bother about what is the exact um, spelling of the attribute and so on. All right. So over here, the user just know that there is a function called get name, and I can get the value of this name, whatever the user is inputting, from the function called get name. All right. And why is this important? Suppose I have changed this name parameter to XYZ. Suppose I have changed it. In that case also it will work. So you are just isolating the code from the user, and still the user can use your code. So when you do this and you run this, so I'll say Arjun and I'll say section D. So it will give you that name, which is Arjun. Similarly, you can have other getters. So there can be a getter of def get house, not house, sorry, section, get section, and you can pass self, and then you can say return self dot house. All right. So similarly, you can print over here, print s dot get. I have I'm writing house, it is section, get section and parenthesis. Now you see, you have written getter section. One more section is there called setter. setter. What does this do? You can change the value of the attributes. If you want to change the value of the attribute, suppose you want to change the value of section. So you can define one function called def set section, and you need two parameters. So this should be underscore. You need two parameters over here. One will be self and whatever you want the name to change to. So I'll just say name or anything. It doesn't matter. You just have to remember what you have named it. So now what you want to do, you want to change the value of name to this name. So let me change it to n for simplicity. All right. So what it is doing, it is changing the value of self dot name from whatever it is to n. And you can now do this. You can say s, and you shouldn't do dot section. You can say set underscore section, and now you will pass the parameter x, y, z, and you should remove this part. Now when you print this, you will see changed value of section. So we'll suppose we are saying Arjun, Arjun, and I'm saying D, but you see, okay, get, it's not get, get section, yeah, Arjun section D, and you see this is set section is actually changed to. Okay, what it is doing, let me see. First, we are saying I am changing. So what is the error? Can anybody tell me? I got the error, but I'm asking you where is the error? What error I made? I got it, but can anybody tell me what error I made? So this is the output. What is the error I'm telling you? I'm not telling you what is the error in my code. What error is the output I'm telling you? You see, when I'm saying print s dot get name, I'm getting xyz. And when I'm saying s dot get section, I'm getting D. And when I'm saying print s, I'm getting xyz is in section D. So where is the error? Where is the error in the code? You see, when I'm saying set section, and in the definition of set section, I'm taking self and n, I'm changing actually self dot name, but I don't want to do that. I want to change the self dot section, right? Is it all right? Is anybody here?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So this is the error. So I had to change section and not name. And I'll let it this n remain n, doesn't matter. All right. So I'll say Arjun and I'll say D, and then it will be, you will get name as Arjun, get section as XYZ, and you say Arjun is in section XYZ. But you see, it has created a problem. What problem it has created? You see, when you are saying set section, you're not checking if this section is appropriate or not. So in that case, you can just copy it and paste it over here. Now you will check if the section, okay, it will be n over here. And now you are checking whatever the section is changed to, if that is there or not, if that section exists or not. And if it exists, then you assign it to self dot section. If not, then you will raise an error which saying invalid section. And if you run this, you will see Arjun and you do section D and you'll get a value error saying invalid section. All right. So I hope you understood how you can check if the whatever you are changing is appropriate or not. Is it all right? You can check if you do this to A and when you run, so you are saying Arjun and you are saying section D, but you are changing. So you are setting the section to section D, but you are changing it to section A over here. And when you do that, then you will see that you are getting Arjun is in section A. Why? Because this check is getting passed. So nothing wrong is there in this check. That's why you are getting Arjun is in section A. Is it all right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now we'll move on to more, I'll not say complicated, more involved bit of code. All right. So these getters and setters are actually very similar to the getters and setters which we use in other object-oriented programming languages like Java and C++. But in Python, you can have a different kind of getters and setters. All right. And it can be a little bit confusing. So if you find it difficult, just ask me to pause. All right. So I'll repeat again. These getters and setters are very simple. These are just functions which will just return this and or change this, but it is just any other function. You are just saying whatever function you can define, you're just defining a function and you are just naming it set and that thing. So it is not very Python specific. It is just like any other function in any other language, but there is a different kind of function in Python called decorators, and I'll not go into detail of what decorators are, but for the time being, you can think of decorators as a function which changes functions. So it can modify other functions. So it is a function which modifies other functions. All right. So one of the decorator in Python is property. So what does it mean? You see, okay, just let me copy it. Copy this code and paste it over here. And I'll delete this part for the time being. All right, I'll delete this part. Yes. Now, you see, when I'm saying get name, parenthesis, get section, parenthesis, and so what I'm trying to tell you, just understand. Initially, initially, when the user wanted to print the section, they could have printed s dot section. That's it. They don't had to give a parenthesis because section was an attribute which was data attribute. It was not method attribute. So the parenthesis was not required. All right. So at s dot section, parenthesis was not required. But when we changed it to getters and setters, they had to give a parenthesis because these were all function calls. Get name, get section, these are all function calls, right? Now suppose the user has code written earlier like this, or the user knows that they can use the code like this. You don't want to change the behavior of the user. You want the user that if he knows s dot section, he can use s dot section and then print s dot section. You don't want to change the behavior of the user. You don't want to tell him that, okay, now you have to say s dot get section and then only you can access whatever is the value of section. You don't want to do that. You want to say, okay, whatever you are used to, if you're used to s dot section, I will do something such that s dot section will perform as a getter function. All right. So I'll tell you again. So the user may have some behavior of using this type of notation s dot section. He doesn't want to give the parenthesis or he doesn't know, and you don't want to change the behavior of the user because that is not very easy to do. So what are you trying to do is you want to make a function call, or not function call, you want to make this as a getter of value section. Somehow you want to make this call s dot section as a getter call and not the attribute, getting accessing the attribute. So I'll show you what it means. All right. So you see, these are attributes, name, sections, attributes of objects. There is something called property of objects. Those are also attributes, but those are special attributes. This name section are attributes of objects. All right. Name section over here, those are data attributes of objects. There is something called property of objects. These properties are special attributes. Those are also attributes, but those are special attributes. And these attributes, uh, you, um, you can, let me give you some code, then you'll understand. All right. So you see, I will change this to s dot section and s dot name. Okay, let me do only one and I'll just okay. Now you see over here what I want is I want to print as I want to print s dot section, but currently this is actually an attribute and not a property. So when you do that, you can actually do that. You can actually do that because we have seen this in our earlier code. Now what I want is I want to make this section as a property and not attribute. And how will that help? You will see. So before making a property, you have to tell Python that this is a property. And for that, you have to use a keyword called @property. So this attribute, whatever we'll define now, Python will know that this is a special attribute called property. And it is defined very similar to functions called def. All right. I know it may seem like what are we doing, but this is how it is defined. It is defined by def, but it will actually behave as an attribute. All right. And we'll write the same name. So this is section, we'll write section and give a parenthesis. And inside that parenthesis, you will give self. Now you want to return the value, which is self dot and you'll say section. All right, self dot section. Now what are you doing? You are defined a function called section, and this whenever you say s dot section, then this property is called. This property is called and not the attribute. So attribute is not called, but the property is called. You should remember this wherever. So over here also, when you're saying self dot section, then this is no longer a attribute of this function. This is a no longer a attribute of the function. This is a property. So whenever you say self dot section, Python will come here and see what is this section. All right, Python will come here and see what this section is. So this is actually a getter. So this is actually how you get that value. And to set that value, you have to make a setter. I hope I'm getting it. When I'm saying this self dot section, that this is actually a property. This is not an attribute. Whenever you define @property with a name section, then this section is a special attribute, which is a property to this object called student. Now, since we have defined an attribute, special attribute, there should be some way to assign some value to that attribute. And for that, you have to make one more, um, you can say setter property. So not property, I'll say one more function to assign that value, which is a setter. So you will say @. So you see, this is a property and this is actually a getter property, not getter properties. This is a getter function. So you have to say the name of the function section and then dot setter. So this is a little bit different. Python should have written this as getter and this as setter, but Python chose this way. What it did, it said that whenever you write @property, I will think that this is a property, which is a getter. But for setter, you have to write the name of the property, which is section, and then you have to write dot setter. All right. So this is Python's way of doing it. Again, I'll tell you, whenever you write @property, then Python will think, OK, this is a getter function. And whenever you write the name of the property dot setter, then whatever you write below it will be a setter function. So this is what it is. Now I'll say def, and then the name of the function will be same section. All right. And since it is a setter, it will accept two arguments, which will be self and section. I'll say sec. All right. Now I can say self dot section is equals to you can say self dot section will be equal to sec. All right. Is it all right? Up to this, there is one error in this code, but for the time being, is this all right? So when you are saying over here self dot section, this is actually assignment, but this will actually, what it will do is it will come here and then assign. So it will come here and then this assignment will be done. This section will be passed over here and then this assignment will be done. So this is not the usual attribute we have seen till now. This is actually a property now. Now there is one issue. So by the way, before that issue, I have to ask you, is this all right? This is a setter and this is a getter. And over here also you are calling the setter. You are not setting it usually how we used to do in previous codes. This is this call, this setter call, and this section is passed over here, and then this setter is executed. Is this okay? So over here also when you are saying s.section, this setter will be called and not over here. Nothing will be done over here. It will come over here because this section is a property. This section is a property. Is this all right? If no, you can tell me no. I'll just go back and just explain everything else again. Everything again.
Okay, sir. I mean, it's too much for me, but I'll watch the session again and I'll go through.
All
But
right.
so far, I'm getting you in getting an overall idea of this, but I need
Okay.
to go through this again.
Okay. So I'll just recap a little bit. So you see, why did we have a getter and setter function? Because we don't want the user to just access the attributes. All right. So we know what is a getter function, what is a setter function. All right. So this is a setter function, this is a getter function. And by the way, whatever we are telling now, this property and all these are advanced level stuff of object-oriented programming. This is also absolutely all right. So we are in a beginner level course. This is a very beginner level course. So if you have understood till this also, this getter and setter, that is also fine. No issue. But since I am here, I thought of explaining what this is. All right. So I'll just quickly go back and tell you. All right. So over here we have getters and setters. All right. And you can get that using a function call. But why are we doing what we are doing right now? Because we don't want to make the user change their behavior. User has some, usual behavior or just saying s dot name, s dot section. We don't want to tell the user that you have to change from now on. You cannot say s dot name. You have to say s dot get name. You don't want to do that. That is why we have something called property. Now, when we say a property, then attribute is not there. The usual attributes are not there. Those attributes becomes property of the object. All right. So section, when I say property section, this section becomes a property of the object. And this function, whenever you say property and what function you define below it will be a getter. And for setter, you have to say section dot setter. And why this is so big? This is because there is something called deleter. Or I don't remember the spelling, but there is called something called DELETER, something like that. So we have a property setter, getter, setter, and deleter. That is why this funky notation. All right. So I don't remember this spelling, but this is something like that is there. You can delete using del keyword. We have used del keyword. For the time being, this is a getter function and this is a setter function. All right. Now, since section is a property, wherever s dot section you mention, it will behave as a function called. So this will be called. This thing will be called. All right. So this section will be referred. So when you are saying s dot section, section, this will be called. This will be called. All right. So over here also when you are saying self dot section, this will be called. All right. Now, what is the issue we have created? The issue we have created is we are saying s dot section is a property. And again, we are calling it inside that function. So we are calling it inside that call. So it's behave like a recursive call. So we don't want to do that. And for that, there is a convention, just a convention to make it underscore. So this is the original attribute. So all the attributes which we are doing over here, self dot section is equal to sec. it comes over here. So this is what the main attribute is, the old attribute is, and this section becomes the property. So inside this section, the old attributes which we have discussed till now comes over here, and this also becomes underscore section, self dot section. So inside this property, you have to have that old attribute. So you can say what is the use? You will see, but this attribute is the old attribute we are doing till now. This is the new attribute or special attribute called property. All right. So you can name this anything else. You shouldn't name it underscore section. But why are we naming it underscore section? Since we know that it is section and property is section, so attribute should also be named section, but we cannot name it the same. That's why we can say underscore section. Now if you run this, so this is actually a setter. This is actually a getter. All right. Now if you run this, so this is, you see, this is a getter. And now if you run this, ARJUN, and you see D. So D will be assigned. So you see, when you pass D, so this will get D. Over here, this will be D, and this will actually call this setter. And over here, actual attribute of this object is underscore section and not section. Section is a property. Underscore section is the actual attribute. All right. And over here also, when you are saying s dot section, then you are actually going to the property and checking what is the underlying attribute, which is actually self dot underscore section. And similarly, if you have a assignment or setter, you can say s dot section is equals to xyz now, because there is no check for now, but you should check. But for the time being, this is what you want to do. So you can say Arjun and say section D, and it is changed to xyz. Now it is changed to xyz, but you want to make it, you want to check if it is xyz or not. So you just copy this, and in the setter you just place this. Sorry. Now whenever there is a assignment or setter is called, it will check if ABC is valid or the input is valid or not. First, let me execute this, then I'll tell one more thing. Arjun and section xyz. You see, it is raising an error and saying invalid section. All right. So over here we are getting an error. Now, since I am telling you self dot section is also a call to this property, you don't need to check section over here, because whenever there is a call to this property, it is checking automatically if it is appropriate or not. So why should we check over here? So you can just remove this part of the code. I'm removing it. Just be careful what I'm doing. You can just remove this part of the code. Why? Because you're already checking it in the property function. So you just remove it and it will work as you intended it to do. Is it okay? Is it all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now what will we do is we'll just so these were a lot property attributes will go in other things, which is not very difficult, because in my previous class we had discussed this, all right, which is called inheritance. All right, so we'll see. Okay, there is something called class method. I have skipped that. Have I not written? Okay. Class method. This is also important. Now, this class method. All right. So for you to understand what class method is, you see over here, we have methods. These methods require an instance. You see, if you don't have an instance called S. You are having an object or instance of this object type S. You cannot call these functions. This function is cannot be called because you see it requires self. It requires an instance. This function also require an instance. All the functions we have defined till now, this function also requires an instance. So these are called instance functions because you can run those functions only when you have an instance of this object type. Until and unless you have this instance, until and unless you have the instance, you cannot call these functions. But there may be cases such that you want to call some function of the data type or not data type, object type, but you may not require a instance. You may not require an instance. So I'll show you one example of where can this be a case, and then you will understand. All right. So you see, I am saying that um, okay, I'm saying that the students in a class are assigned a section, but that is being assigned by a person, say the principal. So the principal is actually assigning a section to the student. All right. So I will actually create a class for this principal. So I'll say class, I'll say principal. All right. And I'll just say colon. Now I'll say there are only 4 sections A, B, C, D. So there is something called class variables. What is class variables? A variable which is shared across all instances. So you can create an object from a object type, but that object is an instance of that object type, right? But there are some variables you want it to be shared across all instances. So this is one such case. You want the section to be shared between all the instances. All right, so you have something called class instances. So I'll say sec is equals to one list, which is a list of the classes sections sorry, A, B, capital B, I'll say C, and I'll say D. All right. So this SEC is a list which is a class variable. Why class variable? Because you see it is not defined inside any function. It is defined inside the class. And whenever you create an instance, this sec can be accessed by all the instances of the uh, class or the object. All right. Now there is something called class method. For a class method, you have to tell Python that is a class method using the notation @class method. All right. Whenever you say @class method, then Python will understand, okay, this is not an instance method, this is a class method. And what do we want to do? So I'll say this principal assigns one section to a student randomly. So I'll just import random. So I'll say import random because I want to use the random module. And I'll say this class method, I'll say define, and I'll say assignment, ASSIGNMENT. So since this is a class, sorry, section assignment, that is I'm naming it as assignment. And what this function will take, you see, this is a class function. It is not an instance function. And what it will take one name of a student and it will assign a class. So before the arguments, I'll show you what it does. It will print the name of the student. So say name is the variable of the J, and I'll say plus is in section, and I'll say comma random dot choice. If you have not seen what is choice, you can go back and see. All right, and I'll say between this list give one choice. All right, so I'll write one notation, but I'll tell you what it is. CLS dot sec. Now this function requires arguments. First, there should be, so whenever we had a instance method, you had to had self. So you had to had self and then the variable name. So name is there, so variable name. But since this is not a instance method, this is a class method, you will have to have a variable called anything, but the first variable will be class. So it is not an instance, it is referring to that class. All right. So CLS can be anything, but it will be the class. And over here also it is saying cls.sec. It means this class is class variable. All right, whatever the class is, that class is class variable. So you need this because you want some reference. If you want, if you had not, if you don't have this variable, you couldn't have referred SEC. How will you refer SEC? How Python know what SEC is? To refer this SEC, you require this CLS. If you don't have CLS, you will not be able to write cls.sec. This CLS is actually meaning that principal. So instead of CLS, this principal will be passed to this method, not method. Yes, passed to this method. All right. So this CLS will take value principal actually. All right. All right. So this is what it is. So if you want to see how this is doing, you see, I'll say pass and I'll just run this and I'll say principal. So principal dot sec. If you do this, you will be able to access this class variables. That is what this is doing. CLS dot sec. It means that you are trying to access this class variable. All right. So instead of CLS, principal will be passed. And what this class is doing, it is just saying there is one principal which will assign each student one section. All right, very simple. Now I'll say principal dot, and I'll say the method name, which is assignment, ASSIGNMENT, and I'll pass one name. So I'll say Arjun, and let's see what it is assigning. Okay, missing. Why is this an error? Missing one required positional argument name. I have passed name. I have passed name. I have passed name. What is the issue? Just 1 minute. All right. Why? But this shouldn't be the case. Shouldn't be the case. All right, I'll check, but it is working with this. So you have to pass the type and also the name, but it shouldn't be the case. It should only require one parameter. I'll check this, but now it is working. So this is what class method is. All right. Is it clear what class method is? If I remove CLS from here and I'll just say sec, and I remove principal from here, will it work? Sorry. No, it is not working. Sec is not defined. Yeah, should be there. All right, so I'll have to check why this has to be passed. I guess it shouldn't be passed, but it is telling me to pass it. All right, so is this class method clear? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right, so class method is clear. And since we are here, so I will do one thing. I'll just copy this over here. This one is not the property one. Okay, this is just the simple getter and setter, and I'll paste over here. And what I will do is, you see, this class is actually a student class, and I have a main class which is calling a function called get student, and get student is getting the name and section and then returning an object. So since we have an object called student, why doesn't the class takes care of this? Why doesn't the class takes care of taking a user input name taking a user input section and then returning it to me. Are you getting it? Why shouldn't this be the case? I'll just remove all this for simplicity. So what I'm saying is, okay, what I'm saying is this this get student handles student data, right? It has name, it has section. Why don't we just put this inside the class method? So this we can do that using this class method. All right. Class method is required this way. So you have to say @class method. And then you will say get student. I'll just, okay, just I'll say def, I'll just define it again. Get. So instead of get student, I'm just saying get, it can be anything. Class, not class, CLS. If you say class, then it will conflict with the keyword. So that's why I'm saying CLS. It can be anything, but I'm just saying CLS. I'll just copy paste. So it is taking user input. It is taking as name and section. All right. And now it will just return the object. We'll just return this object and I'll just remove this. And over here in the main function, there is nothing called get student. So I'll just say student, student student dot. I'll call this class method get. And since it is saying that I should pass the name of the class, so I'm passing class, but it shouldn't be the case. I don't know why it is doing. You see, your student class is taking care of everything. It is taking the user input, it is taking everything, it is just checking everything and then just giving you an object student. You don't have to worry about anything. All right. So you'll just, okay, one position, but two are given. You see over here, it is saying nothing should be passed. What is this? I don't know. You see, I have not passed over anything. Okay. So I'll say Arjun and I'll say section D and it is Arjun is in section D. You see, you get the point what where am I confused? Over here, nothing is passed, but over here it requires principal and I don't know why. Hello? Do you get the my point of confusion? Hello? Hello, yes, yes, you can speak.
It's now it's going over my head. I can't take more.
Okay. All right. So I'll just stop now, maybe. So you can ask me to stop it is if it is going. Okay, this is why it is asking me to pass principal. You see, I have just commented this part class method out. That is why. Just 1 minute. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I had commented this class method out. That is why it was creating an issue. You go back and see the lectures. I guess it will be clear. This CLS, I knew that you shouldn't pass a class over here, but now I had not mentioned that it is a class method @class method. That is why I was had to pass this object over here, but now it is working. All right. So you go back and see the lecture again. And if you have an issue, ask me tomorrow. And in inheritance, we have talked about inheritance in our previous class, but that is left and I'll do it in my next class. All right, so I'll just give you attendance. Pratibha, are you here? Were you able to understand?
Yes, sir, but a bit, I was feeling it a bit difficult.
Okay, so object-oriented programming is a little bit engaging. So if you don't know a lot about it and if you don't practice, then it becomes an issue.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess Kalyavani ma'am was also here, so I'll give her the attendance. She's not here right now still. So today's, yes, do you want to speak?
No, no.
All right, so we'll meet maybe on Saturday, next Saturday, sorry. And please go back and see the lecture. And if you have any issue, we will discuss again. And this inheritance pass is not very difficult. as far as what I will discuss, it gets difficult as and when you move more and more in object-oriented programming. But as far as this course is concerned, you know a lot about Python programming, and object-oriented programming is your choice. If you want to take the approach of object-oriented programming or not, it is completely your choice, but it is recommended choice. All right. So yeah. And what am I planning to do is I'll tell in the next class. It is getting late. Anything you want to tell me, or you want me to cover anything else, you can tell me now. All right. Yes.
You mentioned that there will be some discussion on the assignments, right?
Yes. So next week I am planning to do the discussion on the assignments one
Okay.
day, either
Okay.
Saturday or the coming Monday.
Okay.
All right. So thank you. Thank you for joining.
Thanks. 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 Shubham.